Deleted scenes are certainly a fascinating curiosity on what either a film or TV program might have been like. If the missing scene was retained for the final product, they could be released via a bonus feature on a home media release. Or they may be unofficially leaked to the public, with the internet making it more accessible than ever before to share rare content globally. But it's undeniable when deleted content doesn't get shared publicly that it contributes the majority of the interest of lost media seekers, of wanting to know of what they can't see, with only the faintest of clues of what those scenes could be like. But things certainly do get interesting for when there's a lack of confirmation of unreleased footage, as it can be difficult to decipher as to where the truth lays, giving us many topics of mysterious deleted scenes that we can't say for sure if they do exist. And sometimes the finale for many of these searches may conclude of they never existed to begin with. So in today's presentation, let's look into the grey spot of both the rumours and Chinese whispers of the lost media community, of either mysterious or completely fake missing scenes. Now I'm sure there's a great plethora of topics of unconfirmed deleted scenes, so if there are any that piques your interest and I don't mention it here, please share it in the comment sections down below, as I would like to revisit this topic in a future video. Okay, with the context out of the way, let's take a look at our first entry. The 1993 Jurassic Park film had several conceptualized endings. An early rendition saw the T-Rex chasing down the main characters, just as they're able to hop on a helicopter. But two versions that were close to identical to the final film is where Ellie and Alan, along with the two kids, are faced down by the two raptors before the dinos make the final blow. They're shot down by John Hammond, definitely a left turn to the character that we knew in the final film. So the second idea was with the displayed dinosaur skeletons in the welcome exhibit. They would fall and collapse onto the raptors, killing them off. But the filmmakers felt that the dinosaur star of the movie, Tyrannosaurus Rex, needed to make one final appearance by the end, so it would be old Rexy to save the day by killing off the two raptors. Although viewers have playfully jabbed on how did the T-Rex get into the building without making a sound or breaking in, leaving a pile of debris.
Now I was thinking, how does it get in the building? What he said was, well, Grant's backing up and the raptors are coming forward, and one of the raptors jumps in the air and this T-Rex comes in and grabs it. And I just cracked up because he described how the T-Rex got into his movie, not how it got in the building, from the top of the frame.
But hey, it's fun and near to the end, so it's fairly inconsequential.
I think it's a great ending, to us be saved by one of the things that's trying to eat us.
My personal favourite Easter egg in the film is where when the T-Rex roars, a banner falls that says "When dinosaurs ruled the earth," sharing the same name to another dino flick that was released 23 years prior. Oh, and in case you don't know, it's my favourite dinosaur movie ever made, so yeah, can't help but love it. Anyway, backtracking a little bit, viewers who saw it in the cinema swore that there was a shot of the T-Rex breaking through the building. Supposedly in the theatrical cut, you see the T-Rex head bursting through a wall before biting down on the first raptor that's about to pounce. This shot would later be removed when the film came to home media. But when you take a look around at the setup, it doesn't really fit in with the missing shot. As I mentioned earlier, there's no rubble or debris indicating that the T-Rex burst through the wall. The only possible thing that the T-Rex may have burst through was the hanging white tarp. As well, when you look at the pouncing shot of the raptor before the T-Rex comes in at the top of the frame, there doesn't appear to be any easy straight cuts. The shot is completely contained in one take. And if that wasn't a good enough reason that the shot never existed to begin with, ILM artist Stephen William, who worked on Jurassic Park, pretty much confirmed in a tweet that it was completely non-existent. And in case if that wasn't enough confirmation, I was speaking to my mate Toast Woomy, who was able to track down a theatre bootleg of Jurassic Park. And after watching the ending, the shot is indeed not there. When I was younger, I was always fascinated by the movie cover of Edward Scissorhands with Edward and a butterfly, playing off the old term, being so gentle that they wouldn't harm a little insect. But as well at the same time, I was slightly confused as a moment like that doesn't happen in the movie. I remember having this conversation with my brother many years ago and he swore that he saw that scene in there. So we sat down and watched the movie from beginning to end and that moment never turned up. There was additionally a plot thread that never got resolved in the film of people telling Edward that there may be a doctor that might be able to help him with his disfigurement.
You know, I have a doctor friend who I think could help you.
I was certain that there was missing content in the film, and after doing some minor research, I was quite excited to find a Blu-ray that was dubbed the Extended Edition, so from there I purchased it. I synced up my new Blu-ray copy with my old DVD, watching through to see what the new footage was. However, there didn't appear to be any new scenes, as both versions were more or less synchronized with one another. After doing a little bit of digging on the internet, I found out that when the movie was first brought to the UK, that some minor edits had to be done to bring down the rating to a PG. The only scene that needed to be cut was near towards the end where Jim is beating Edward with a crowbar. In the original version, he hits Edward quite a number of times, but in the UK release, Edward is only hit by the crowbar twice. And additionally, he doesn't get kicked in the stomach like the US version. Overall, the British release only had about 15 seconds cut out of it. When the film came to Blu-ray in 2007, the UK had its version fully restored back to the original, although with the age rating now upgraded to a 12 certificate. And unlike the US cover, the UK version had the added tagline of the Extended Edition, even though it only runs 15 seconds longer. Although putting on the front cover the unrated cut would still feel a bit misleading, as if you had somebody who wasn't overly familiar with Edward Scissorhands would probably presume that it was some kind of horror, giving Edward's fearsome looking appearance with his hands. And they would probably presume with a tagline like the unrated cut that the edit must be something quite vile, which is not what Edward Scissorhands is all about. Certainly, the story has many parallels to the horror tale Frankenstein, and horror star Vincent Price does make a minimal appearance in the film, but Edward Scissorhands is a romantic love drama story, not a horror, so if I had to choose between extended and unrated, I'd choose the first. Although no matter which way you look at it, both are still misleading. But technically, it is softly true that this is an extended cut for the UK release, and they likely put it on there to prompt more sales. So what are you gonna do? A similar situation happened in Finland, where 15 seconds were removed as well to give it a K10 rating. In the region of Europe, it was actually Norway that had the most amount of footage that was removed out by about 26 seconds. But believe it or not, there are still completely missing deleted scenes that have never garnered a public release. One features Edward and Kim avoiding the paparazzi, and the other one is set soon after Edward's minor accident at the TV station, where he's taken to a hospital. Now, up until this moment in the film, like I mentioned near to the beginning, Edward has encountered several people saying that they know a doctor that may be able to help him.
I know a doctor that might be able to help you.
I'd like to meet him.
Now in the theatrical version, mention of a doctor that may be able to help stops after the TV station scene, and it's never referred to again or at least concluded in any capacity by the movie's end. That's because it was meant to be wrapped up in this hospital scene, where Edward asked the nurse if the doctor can indeed help him with his hands. Sadly for Edward, the nurse relays that there's no such doctor that can help him. Now, going back to the original dilemma of the subject, what about that scene between Edward and the butterfly? Well, after looking into it, I believe that the scene was just a pure invention of the marketing, as there was nothing that I could find that indicated that the scene really did existed. The Dino De Laurentiis 1976 remake of King Kong have certainly divided movie lovers and monster fans. On one hand, it built upon the Beauty and the Beast relationship from the original, with more sentimental moments with Kong and his love interest Wan. Additionally, the special effects are truly breathtaking, forever being timeless, still holding up very incredible to this day, being one of the early standout works of Rick Baker. It's certainly a time capsule of one of the very rare times we'll ever see a mainstream Hollywood movie of utilising animatronics to bring King Kong to life. That, and we will likely not see anytime soon a Kong movie alluding to cheeky flicks.
Did you ever meet anyone before whose life was saved by Deep Throat?
Out of all the Kong movies that have ever been made, it certainly feels the most like a soap opera. But in exchange for that drama, there is not much of a adventure. while the ambition and behind-the-scenes hard work can be clearly seen on screen. Regardless of the filmmaker's affections to the movie, being a remake, the motion picture was always going to be compared to the original film, and a huge sting to a lot of people is where in every other Kong movie, Kong resides in a lost land filled with prehistoric creatures. The 76 film doesn't feature any other dinosaurs or creature barring Kong and a giant snake. It certainly zaps a lot of the mystique and wonder of the original King Kong mythology, making the world of the remake feel much more hollow in comparison. And while yes, defenders have claimed that this was done to compensate for the love story instead, it's like removing the Daleks and aliens from Doctor Who, zapping Spider-Man of his powers, and taking away the monsters and magical elements of Lord of the Rings such as Gollum and Gandalf. You're kind of separating on what made those properties so memorable to begin with. But hey, while it may be the least memorable out of all the King Kong films, given the abundance of Kong movies we've received in the last decade alone, one can step back and view the 1976 adaptation as a unique one-off now. But the biggest contributing factor I personally believe as to why we didn't see any dinosaurs in that rendition is that Dino De Laurentiis didn't see the technology being advanced enough to be on the equivalent of Rick Baker's special effects. Now don't get me wrong, there were plenty of movies prior and during the 70s that featured and depicted dinosaurs. And yes, I would say in certain shots of those movies, the dinosaurs do look quite spectacular, but their movements certainly look quite limited to when it comes to the more dynamic shots. Unlike the Rick Baker Kong suit where, when he moves, it doesn't look as unnatural. Now of course there was stop motion, where the models are free to articulate unlike the rubber suits and latex hand puppets. But De Laurentiis didn't want to go down the stop motion route as he felt the technology was extremely outdated. Perhaps if the film was made a decade later, then I can more easily see dinosaur animatronics from the decade standing alongside seamlessly with the Rick Baker ape suits. Maybe they could have taken the approach of the King Kong inspired ape movie, Mighty Peking Man, where instead of confronting prehistoric creatures, the sailors could have faced up against modern day animals, as a way that they could still involve the sailors with a bit of action, without the need to format complex special effects to bring to life virtually fantasy animals. However, there was very nearly going to be more monster action on the island. The editor of the magazine Famous Monsters of Filmland, Forrest Ackerman, got his hands on a 1975 draft of the remake, and made quite a lengthy summary in one of the Monster magazine's issues prior to the movie's release. The description was quite precise of the final product, although with the exception of an added scene in the summary, taking place shortly before the log scene, the crewmen ponder if Dwan is still alive, speculating the grisly ways that she could have been ended off. But then the ground begins to move. Erupting from the earth is a humongous snake, wrapping its coils around one of the men, crushing him to death. The snake chases down and ends up swallowing some of the other sailors. The snake would later reappear to battle Kong. The 1976 King Kong feature received a 3-hour cut for when it was first shown on television, and in 2021 this version finally received a Blu-ray release on home media. But out of all the additional material that was included back in, the sailors' encounter of the enormous snake was never featured in any of these cuts. And while fans have loved to speculate that there's an unseen sequence out there hiding in the Paramount archive, the moment was more than likely never filmed, as it's not included in the film's shooting script. However, there are still 2 completely unseen deleted moments that were only ever shown in the preview screenings. The first one sees the villain of the story, Wilson, who had just been able to avoid King Kong's foot. He goes off to one corner and begins breaking down in tears. Nearly the whole deleted scene has been made available apart from the last shot of Wilson crying, and the second one set at the very end of the film, after King Kong fell off the Twin Towers. Jack tries to reach out to Dwan, who is surrounded in a swarm of reporters. Jack, as seen in the final cut, stops and hesitates of going any further, but in the preview screening we would have seen him walked away, with Dwan watching her lover disappear in the crowd, sobbing in tears. Like the prior moment, the full deleted scene has never been made available. The 1968 film of Planet of the Apes spawned a yearly film series that ran during the early 1970s. Currently, nearly all of them have missing deleted scenes that have never been made accessible to the public. Today we're going to be focusing on the fourth entry of the series, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. Now, trying to explain the overarching story of each movie can be a little bit complicated to just try and summarise, but basically by the third film, the ape characters of the future come back to the past, where their ape child Caesar grows up to lead an ape rebellion by the fourth film. The ongoing sequels semi-act like prequels, telling the story on how exactly apes rose against humans. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes was by far the darkest out of all the original Ape movies. In fact, all the films were given G ratings, albeit bear in mind this was based on the age rating system of its time.
I want that baby. If you won't give it to me, I'll shoot.
Bloody bastard.
With Conquest being the exception, garnering a PG certificate, although the version that ended up being released was a re-edit of a much more gruesome, bloodier original version, that when it was in preview screenings, some members of the audience found it appalling, especially parents.
Mothers took their children running down the aisles to get out of the theatre because of the bloodiness of the riot. The censor wouldn't pass the film the first time. Too much blood and too much gore.
The long-term viewers who saw these movies were accustomed of seeing them under the family-friendly banner, which the producers were very keen to keep, so the more extreme violent moments were rid away with. The original ending where the apes killed Governor Breck, and Caesar's speech basically summarising that the human race is completely doomed, was recut to remove Breck's death, and Roddy McDowall, who played Caesar in the movie, was brought in to dub in a final monologue speech of apes dominating but coexisting with humans.
We have seen the birth of the Planet of the Apes!
For decades, fans could only experience this darker version of the movie by either the novelization or comic book adaptation that were made to coincide with the original release of Conquest. But in 2008, to coincide with the original 68 Planet of the Apes movie's 40th anniversary, that on the Blu-ray edition of Conquest, that the original unrated cut was included. So it seems like we can close the case on unseen footage from Conquest. Well, not exactly. You see, Conquest was the only one of the original 5 Ape movies to not feature a prologue before the opening credits. But it appeared that there was meant to be one. In both the Marvel comic and novelization, the opening would have seen a runaway escaped slave ape, who doesn't make it incredibly far, being shot down by Night Patrol officers in the city centre. When coming across the body, we would have seen the ape covered in bruises and scars, giving us a taste on the brutality that the humans have been putting the apes through. This scene was never shown in the extended unrated cut on the Blu-ray. Now, maybe we can presume that these external written works were based on an earlier version of the script that didn't make it to the final draft. Well, that can't be the case, as the scene can be found written in the shooting script. Now I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of this name, so my humble apologies. Journalist Dale Iwagina wrote a special Planet of the Apes issue in the Cine Fantastique magazine, who had the pleasure of being present on set while they were filming Conquest, and actually did see the scripted opening being filmed. So if it was very well filmed, why not release it for the extended cut? I mean, when else are you going to have a perfect opportunity to show all of the unseen footage? The only other explanation I could possibly think of as to why it wasn't included is maybe this rendition of the movie is more like a director's cut rather than the extended cut, that the pre-title opening was always intended to be removed out for the final cut. Unfortunately, we no longer have the luxury of speaking to J. Lee Thompson, the director of the movie who passed away in 2002, who could have given some much needed clarity on the situation. For the moment, the opening of Conquest of the Planet of the Apes will remain to be a mystery. Many fans of the Star Wars saga has considered The Empire Strikes Back to be the best movie out of the whole series. Its status of being the best has even extended beyond the Star Wars fandom. Film historians and movie buffs consider it not only one of the best sequels ever made, but possibly one of the best movies of all time.
Culminating in an awesome confrontation between Luke Skywalker and the master of the dark side of the Force, Darth Vader.
So with that, a minor spoiler warning for a popular movie that's about 40 plus years in age. I mean, I don't mean to judge if you've never seen Star Wars. Or actually, I kinda am really. Regardless, by the end of the movie where Luke is in a corner with his fight with Darth Vader, the Sith Lord reveals his true heritage. Contrary as to what Obi-Wan said, Lord Vader himself is in fact Luke's dad. Pretty much the most famous plot twist in all of cinema. It's also the most frequently misquoted movie line, with people often rephrasing it as, "Luke, I am your father." But the actual line spoken in the film is, "No, I am your father." I imagine why it's so misquoted all the time, is that people are giving the sentence a bit of context when putting it to use. However, over the years, people have swore that Darth Vader actually said Luke in the original version, and given how frequently George Lucas has gone back to manipulate his original film series, he's always been altering and tweaking the trilogy, as far back as Episodes 4 re-released in cinemas during the late 70s, long before the special editions of the late 90s, so this by consequence might be very well possible of a minor edit he did on Episode 5. Thankfully, there may be a way that we can find out for certain. In recent years, it's been quite trendy of film fans digging up old theatre bootleg recordings as an opportunity to get to hear the audience's reaction.
You are a sad, strange little man. Farewell.
Film buffs have especially wanted to see the audience reaction to The Empire Strikes Back, purely down to its big famous twist. Well, YouTube user Clavis uploaded what appeared to be a theatre cam recording of the very scene. In this version, Darth Vader actually says the misquote,
"No, Luke, I am your father." No!
Now, for some of you cunning viewers, both No and Luke kind of overlay on top of one another, almost like it's been assembled in a rough edit, and I'm sure by now that my Marvel viewers have been able to identify the audio from the audience. It comes straight from a video of a theatre cam recording of an audience reacting to Infinity War. If you really want to hear the audience engagement of The Empire Strikes Back for when it was first released back in 1980, then an audio version has been uploaded by Morgan's One back in 2011 on the Star Wars fan site Original Trilogy.
Fuzzball.
And now taking a listen at the moment.
No, I am your father.
Yeah, it's the same line and not much of a reaction. Perhaps the audience were just calmly contemplating on what Darth Vader had just said.
I said to myself, he's lying. I wonder how they're gonna play that lie out.
But there is still some missing media related to this moment in Star Wars. For example, to keep the line a surprise, in the shooting script, Darth Vader's words were instead, "Obi-Wan killed your father," and the man inside the Darth Vader costume, Dave Prowse, said that line during that specific take. Mark Hamill was only told moments before filming on what the line was actually going to be in the final cut. This original take from Prowse has never been publicly seen, although it is worth noting that Prowse and Lucas weren't exactly on the best relationship. George went as far as pushing Prowse away from the franchise by banning him from all official Star Wars events. By the time that the original trilogy's deleted scenes were available on Blu-ray, these sequences were incomplete, so did not feature the voice of James Earl Jones. Instead, the voice was provided by Dave Prowse. But his voice was digitally manipulated on the Blu-ray, so it was completely unrecognizable. The unedited versions were completely unavailable until they turned up on Disney Plus nearly a decade later. The stigma between Lucas and Prowse may very well be a factor as to why we've not heard much of his performance as Darth Vader, or Lucasfilm may consider it to be too niche of an interest to release it anyway. When Luke lets go of the rails, Darth Vader was meant to capture him by using the Force, lifting his lifeless body over his head before dropping him back down. The scene was filmed, but it's still amongst many other lost Star Wars deleted scenes that are locked away in the Lucasfilm archive. Who knows as to when or if they will ever be officially released. Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull was the fourth entry of the Indiana Jones series, being released 19 years after the previous installment, The Last Crusade. The reception of the film was certainly divided by hardcore fans of the series, who didn't suspect there would ever be another feature made of the character. It's generally considered to be the lesser out of the four main movies that have been made so far. One of the big talking points that this film introduced to the franchise was the son of Indiana Jones named Mutt.
Mutt can be a little impetuous.
That's not the worst quality in the world.
He's your son.
By the end of the story, Indy marries Marion, Mutt's mother. After the vows are said, a gust of wind blows Joan's hat onto the floor, conveniently landing by Mutt's feet. Mutt picks up the hat, and right before he's able to put it on, his dad swipes the item back and walks on with his bride outside the hall. Apparently a story has circulated for those who saw it in the cinema, where people can remember Indiana Jones saying the line, "In your dreams, kid," as he snatches the hat back. The line is nowhere to be found in any of the home media releases. A similar line is seen in the novelization version of the film, with the quip being, "Not today, kid." I suppose a theoretical reason as to why the line may have been removed out is that if you were intending to make more Indiana Jones sequels, and eventually having Mutt take on the reins of his father, you don't want to exactly dampen down the audience trust for the character by having his dad verbally disapproving on his mantle. Although, as it currently looks prior to the release of Indiana Jones 5, Mutt doesn't look to be set to return to the franchise. Now, as for the deleted scene in question, I spoke to fellow Lost Media hunter Yoshi Killer about my research into this deleted line, and with his connections he was kind enough to look into it for me. In his shooting script he has for the movie, while it features some deleted lines of dialogue that were not said in the final cut, Indy's quip to Mutt is not here. And contacting the Twitter group Theatre Bootleg 00C, which they specialise into tracking down theatre cam recordings of movies. They had a recording of the first week premiere showing of the film, where allegedly the line was cut out after that initial screening. And with the line not being present in this version, we can safely conclude that it never existed to begin with. But there are still completely unreleased deleted scenes from Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, so for any of those lost media seekers who still want to get their toes in that water.